So as folks are getting ready to, maybe if they're thinking about questions, or they're trying to, oh, I see Dean.
Yes, I just unmuted. I didn't have a question.
Oh, were you just playing to see if you could unmute?
I just wanted to see if it would unmute, but I do have a question, and to Dawn's point early on about if you've never faced a crisis, you will at some point. That's very well taken. I think a lot of times, especially those of us in communications, feel as though something doesn't quite rise to the level of crisis. And when it's right getting to that level, we still feel as though we can contain it and we might be able to talk our way out of it or provide services or information that will allow us to escape it with just a few sores or any type of damage. But I guess my real question really comes down to, when do you know that you have reached the level that you need to activate your crisis communications plan well before you really needed to do that, so that you don't find yourself always playing catch up? Because that seems to be the modus operandi for most government agencies, is that we wait too late and then we're always playing catch up, and we never, or I shouldn't say never, we rarely get ahead of the game. And I think that's what this training is all about. So I think Nick and Dawn and Maggie, you as well, just need to reiterate sometimes it's okay to ask for help. It is perfectly okay to ask others to help. So this has been outstanding, and I can't wait for day 2.
Dean, just one thing I'll tell you really quickly, which is an axiom of mine, and Dawn and I talk about this a lot, and it's less about crisis communications, but it's about making mistakes. And what I've coached every team I've ever managed is, if you're going to make a mistake, keep it to early in the process if you can, keep it small if you can, but also tell everybody about it, socialize the daylights out of it. And I guess what that has taught me, Dean, honestly, is no thing is too small to escalate, and let other people kind of jointly come together and say, okay, Nick and his team, they raised their hands, either a mistake was made or something is out there, they've told us about it. Well, now that we've socialized it, we've got the brain trust together, we've got the chain of command together. Now we decide whether or not to escalate it. But I think the idea of socializing and raising your hand and saying, hey, I think we've got an issue here, I think allows you to stay out of the stepping in something that's really much, much worse. So I'll defer to Dawn if there's more to add there.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking about that that chart that I showed earlier with the 4 different levels. I'd say we stay at level 1 most of the time with just stuff going on internally that we're just dealing with. And one of the things that I've kind of started to train myself better in doing is CCing people. Like a lot of stuff goes through email. So I'll CC certain members of our team, or Nick, I'll CC you, and I'll be like, hey, don't know if you know what's going on, but just FYI, just to kind of get them to start thinking like, okay. And sometimes I'll have, I have others on our team who will say, hey, wait a minute, what about this? And they'll ask a question. I'll go, oh my goodness, yes, that makes sense. And you'll start to pull everything together and you'll go, wow, this is bigger than I thought. So when you start adding, you start kind of putting breadcrumbs out there for people on your team that are on the crisis communications team, they might actually inform you about something that you totally forgot about and say, you know what, we really need to jump on this, because remember 3 months ago when something else happened and we weren't on top of it? I'm afraid this might happen this time. And so sometimes, like, bouncing that off of our team will jump in a lot sooner maybe than we normally would. And I would so much like, and Nick will tell you, this happens all the time. Now, I don't want to say all the time, it happens a lot. where there'll be a situation and somebody will say, hey, maybe we need some talking points about this. And so I will scramble, I'll put together all these talking points. I'll have like a whole page or two of talking points put together and nothing happens.
Right.
Well, you know what?
Right.
Okay, great. Nothing happened. But guess what? Our team came together. We put together talking points. We got them approved. The CEO was informed and the media never called. Great.
Hey, Dean, one other thing real quick too, that there is, Dawn had made reference a few slides earlier about a platform that we use called TalkWalker for social listening. And it has, Dawn, I'm sure I'm going to not describe it in as an articulate a way as you would, but it has an index as far as how viral, like the virality and the reach of certain topics. And so part of what we've talked about is just intrinsically or intuitively, you're like, hey, look, this could be a big deal because, you feel it, you feel your blood pressure going up. But actually, TalkWalker does have an index feature where you could say, this thing on TalkWalker is now up to a 4, is now up to a 5. So, it's not foolproof, but it is something that we look at and say, wow, this thing has really gained legs. So that's a tool that has helped us in the past.
And I'll tell you, and I'm sure some of you all out there are going to nod your heads because you were in it just like we were very recently, Russian vodka. Early on, when all that started to happen, we pulled Russian vodka from our shelves and we made a public statement about doing that. And that was a decision that leadership made, and we decided across the board, we're going to do this. Well, it made international news. Like Nick says, TalkWalker. I went on TalkWalker and pulled up our post that we made on Facebook in TalkWalker, and I saw from a scale of 1 to 10, we were at 6 as far as the virality, meaning that our post went all over the globe. It didn't stay in just Virginia. And we were getting calls from media in New York. Yeah, we got a call, I think it was international, BBC or something like that contacted us. So I was like, my goodness, and as soon as I pulled that up, I sent it over to our leadership and I'm like, this doesn't happen very often. Normally we're at like a 2 or a 3, we're at 6. And so that informed them that, hey, guess what? We're getting a lot more attention for this outside of our own state lines, which we're used to keeping things within our state lines, but when it gets outside the state lines, that's a bigger issue. And so that informed me too, that I need to start pulling in people from our team because we're probably going to need a lot more. And actually the next day we had 22, 24 media inquiries about what we had just issued, on our Facebook page. So we were ready though. We had people on staff, but it was craziness for a while.
That's great. I appreciate you guys very much.
Thanks,
you.
Dean.
Thanks, Dean, for your question. Anybody else have a question that they would like to ask while we have Dawn and Nick present for the moment? Again, hit that little microphone. It'll hopefully turn from red to green and you'll be able to ask your question. And so while we wait a few more moments, the question that I have, and again, maybe this is something you're going to cover later on, but when you're talking about the planning for a crisis and you've got all of these messages that you're developing, is part of that also I've heard of developing a dark site. And so what are your thoughts or awarenesses of having a site that is a website that is not visible until there is a crisis, and then that kind of becomes live and it diverts traffic away from the main site so that any questions that are crisis related are diverted there?
I can tell you what I know about what we do not do anything like that. What we do have within the CMS of our website, Dawn had mentioned it earlier, that there is an alert banner that we can turn on and turn off that is just not normally visible, but it is a shadow page that is essentially hidden. It's private. And when something happens, we can go and write free form into that text box, and then we can activate it and have it go live. But it is not a full site. It is not even a full landing page. It is simply an alert. So we do not do that here.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing too, you have to think about, if you're going to have a dark site or a dark page, it has to be maintained. Even though you're not using it, it needs to be current, up to date with any updates that the website has. It can't be something that you create in 2015 and you pull out in 2022. Because it's not going to match. So somebody, webmaster likely, would need to continually keep that site fresh and current. And if that's something that you do as part of your crisis communications planning, and you have it in your plan that annually I will check in with this person and we will update this page, then that's great. But if you don't do that, then it goes stale.
Okay. All right. I see Jacqueline has her hand raised. Okay, there you go. You unmuted yourself. Go ahead,
Hi.
Jacqueline.
Yes, I did.
Finally.
Yes, thank you for doing this. First and foremost, my name is Jacqueline. I'm with the state of Vermont. Our organization, our state, we have a 650,000 person population, so we are much smaller scale for all of this than most other states. Actually, only one other state with a smaller population in the whole United States. So the reason I'm asking that is we spoke a lot about enlisting the help of other agencies, enlisting the help of multiple divisions throughout your own department. Did you have a specific plan as far, because at present we don't have a crisis communications plan, so it sounds like you had one and just built it from 8 pages to 80 pages. We're kind of starting from scratch with this. And so I was just wondering, as you enlist the help, especially of other agencies, is there a special method that you go? Do you host like a webinar like this where you're teaching them about your communications plan, or how did you go about communicating your crisis plan?
Well, and we have a large staff as far as the communication side. So it's probably much larger than some of the other states. I don't know, but what I can say though, and we're going to talk more on May 4th about all the different roles and where you can pull people from to fit the different roles on your crisis communications team. But I will say that the crisis communications planning time that you're in right now, because it sounds like you don't have one and you're going to start doing this, this is where you start feeling people out, start learning who you have. You might have some people in HR, somebody in IT. You might have people who can fit certain roles on your team, and you may not even know it. They may be excellent writers. They may be excellent speakers. They may be really good at fixing things, troubleshooting. Those are
They
the
might be
kind of
subject
people.
matter experts on different topics.
Exactly. And so, that's what I did, is I started saying, okay, what could potentially happen? What might be the questions that we're going to get from the media, from the public, and who do we have internally who can help us to tell that story? And just map out, in this division, I have this person and this person, and they would talk about X, Y, and Z. In this division, I have this person, they talk about X, Y, and Z. So, and mapping that out is so important, because, I've written this plan like top to bottom, redone it. So I kind of know this stuff in my head, but somebody who's new on our team, like we have a new social media person now, she doesn't know all of those people, or she might not even know them like their names. Yet she's so new. So showing her that information helps her to figure out, oh, okay, here's where I would go to get that information, or find that person. Yeah, you've got a tough road ahead of you.
I'd also say,
all this together.
I'd add to that real quick, Jacqueline, that if you can be the evangelizer, or if you have an evangelizer that believes in it, it's really, really important. I mean, just to kind of case study what happened with us. I mean, so I'm just coming up on my 3rd year here. And I'm Dawn's manager, and Dawn had been through one-on-ones and group meetings, has said, hey, you know what, Nick, we got to get on this crisis thing. And literally throughout the 1st year, you're just busy on other things, and we just didn't have time to get to it. And just Dawn would not stop beating this drum, to her credit. And in year 2, we picked it up. And just because she was such an evangelizer for it, and evangelize through me, and then now I'm surfacing up to senior leaders, that's how I think you break open into who are these other subject matter experts, who can become, you know, an influencer or a thought leader within. So again, you know, small population, small organization, Jacqueline, but if you can find an evangelizer or find a partner that can help you surface it, I think you'll uncover who some of those advocates can be and some of those SMEs can be to help you out.
So if I can just kind of chime in, and Jacqueline, I don't know if this is part of what, you know, the question you were asking about is, I think one of the slides Dawn presented were the different crisis scenarios, and maybe, you know, focusing on that particular slide and then brainstorming, you know, in brainstorming, anything goes, right? So write down what could potentially happen in any of those scenarios, and then just kind of drill it down further, if you will, to identify maybe who in the agency would be the appropriate person that is the subject matter expert, and you know, maybe developing something in writing that maybe you can share with you know, your supervisor in some way, shape, or form, and just kind of draw them into a discussion. That's sort of where my head went when you asked your question, and what, you know, Dawn and Nick were talking about.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you. That's all really helpful. Yeah, it's to your point, I'm the first comms and policy person for the department. So, yep, we've got a lot of this sort of strategic planning coming up. So I really appreciate y'all structuring this out for us. It's really helpful.
Anybody else? Again, that little red button. Sorry,
I
go
was
ahead,
just going to make just one other remark real quick. And if I didn't say this in my intro after Travis, I meant to say it. One thing that I have had to do is check my ego at the door. And when I mentioned Dawn's expertise, it was evident to me very, very quickly that on this team, this is something that I did not have the expertise to do this. Dawn had the expertise to do this. And so that's why she is the public information officer, and I'm kind of the JIC manager. We'll talk more about the JIC manager or Joint Information Center and what that means and what that is. But meeting out roles and meeting out responsibilities is really about getting it done and figuring out who are the right people to do it. And then for me, the best thing I could do is get the heck out of the way, to be perfectly frank. So there may be a time and a place in your respective organizations where I'm contributing in ways that I can contribute, but it's not at the top of the house, so to speak. I give that to Dawn, and Dawn runs with that. So just something to think about.
Yeah. And the other thing I want to add on to that, and I'm certainly not by any means offering Nick and Dawn's services, but we are a community of controlled jurisdictions. And so if, you know, there are questions that you have, or, you know, you started a plan and you would like input, you know, please remember NABCA, please remember Dawn and Nick. And, you know, our intent as an organization to help you do what you do would be to offer whatever is possible to make that happen. So, you know, I just want to say that as well. You're not there alone. It might seem daunting. And I know one of the things that I have to reframe my head into is that if I have this big task that I get an anxiety attack because it's overwhelming, I just kind of focus on what's the first step. And from that point, you know, it just unfolds and unfolds and unfolds. So whatever steps you need to take, you're not there alone. You've got us as, you know, allies, a resource, however you need us to be involved where you are. So just a few more seconds for anybody that may have questions. I really would like to give you that opportunity. And so one final question for me before I go into my conclusion notes, just giving somebody else time. So, you know, in one of the presentations or the comments that you guys were making, you were talking about social media. And I know social media, you know, TikTok was, you know, the newest fandangling thing on the, you know, on the internet. And, you know, that may not be an appropriate platform because a lot of kids are on it. But in terms of social media channels that are viable and appropriate for control systems, I mean, Facebook still has a role despite its, you know, up and downs and everything people say. You know, Twitter, we don't know what's going to happen with Twitter since, you know, it may become a private a social media platform shortly. LinkedIn has gone up and down, and you know, now that is becoming a professional platform for a lot of people. I mean, are there, I don't know, must-have social media platforms that, you know, you need to be involved in at all?
I guess I would say it's an evolving landscape for sure. I guess the way I would say it, it's a twofold answer. Somebody who's in my 50s, Facebook, you know, is supposed to be for my demographic. I don't even go there anymore, but I know that you know, there's a lot of people still there. Facebook, Twitter is still a very popular platform. People aren't just going to quit it overnight. But what I would say is that where people are is where you need to be. LinkedIn, we look at more for things like employment announcements, recruitment, things like that, celebrating people's anniversaries. When we release videos, we go to LinkedIn. But when we have things that relate to crisis management, crisis communications, it's been Facebook and Twitter and our website and email, period. The second part, though, since you mentioned TikTok, we're looking at TikTok and we're looking at Pinterest for our Spirited Virginia brand voice. Has nothing to do with crisis communications. It just has to do with the way that we speak in our retail voice to retail customers about celebratory occasions, things like that. But I would say where the people are is you need to meet people where they are, and where people are generally are on Facebook and Twitter.
And I'll add for crisis, something that we did, our webmaster actually did this, is Twitter. Usually, I know, having been in emergency management and transportation, that was kind of our go-to place for putting out instant messages to people. And that's where people will often go when there's a crisis to find out the latest. What we did when COVID hit is we had the webmaster, we had a page set up on the website that had information about COVID, you know, had all the CEO messages that went out, and all that. What we did is the webmaster had all the tweets on the right-hand side of the page that we were sending out. And that was just so that they can see that here's the messaging we put out, and then you can click here and see the message that the CEO sent out, the message that we sent to our partners, because we want to be transparent as well. And everyone else on this call, government organizations, you want to be as transparent as possible. And you want to be able to provide information to people and show them what you've put out there, because you will get reporters who will say, well, what did you tell your employees? Well, go on our website. Look, we put out there exactly the message we sent to our employees, so you can see it too. We're being transparent. So yeah, having that landing page and then the tweets right there. I mean, that just, I think it was more about being as open and honest about what we're communicating more than anything.